In this video, I'm going to talk about how to answer top 10 behavioral interview questions in job interviews with Google, and as you'll see next, they're quite interesting. Okay, the first question I'd like to talk about here, tell me about the time when you were trying to understand a complex problem and you had to dig into the details to figure it out. Who did you talk with, or where did you have to look to find the most valuable information? How did you use that information to help solve the problem? Right, so this question would be in the context of maybe starting a deep dive, into your subject matter expertise for the role that you're applying for. And I want you to notice that this question is framed specifically to both individual and manager level types of roles. Who did you talk with, or where did you have to look to find the most valuable information, right? So an individual contributor role would rather focus on the where did you look to find the most valuable information that, essentially help you to understand that complex problem, right? For manager level types of roles, it would also make sense to talk about who did you talk with to solve that problem. Or even, for executive types of roles, this could as well make sense if you delegated someone to deal with this complexity. But long story short, this is the type of question, a time when you're trying to understand a complex problem, that's in a scenario of a deep dive in a job interview. Maybe a quick reminder here, you'll want to answer these questions in the STAR format. You'd want to use stories which are the best possible stories you want to sell yourself in a job interview, your successes, needless to say, and even if they're not the most recent, but they must really have to be your strongest possible stories, which again relate to your subject matter expertise. All right. Second question I'd like to talk about here would be why Google? Okay, and of course, as you might expect, this is one of the most commonly asked interview questions in pretty much any company, but the difference is always being made in the details. And one of the more common mistakes people do answering why Google would be to over-compliment the company. You are an exceptional company with exceptional trajectory. You have some amazing people working here, and I'd like to join you, you will rarely hear someone to differentiate themselves with an answer to this interview question. So, for example, you could go something along the lines of, well, you know what, I'm not sure I want to join you just yet. I'm here to learn more about the opportunity and see on whether we can have a mutually beneficial relationship, right? I agree that not every candidate could afford saying this, but nevertheless, it's a peculiar approach, and I find that if you think a bit differently, you will increase your chances to pass these job interviews, and make a strong impression. After all, the purpose of a behavioral interview is that you score well on things such as clarity of thought, and communicating the idea that you want to communicating your subject matter expertise in such a way that you convince them that you're the right person for the job. Okay. Next question, tell me about the time when you did not have enough data to make the right decision. How did you address the situation? What was the outcome? Okay, so this is a very classic type of interview question. When you didn't have enough data, how did you find that data? How did you resolve that ambiguity? Okay, so the key word you'd want to take from this question is ambiguity, dealing with ambiguous situations. And as you'd expect, the director level will deal slightly differently with an ambiguous situation than a software engineer. All right, but nevertheless, dealing with ambiguity is a surprisingly efficient method to determine if someone is really good on stuff such as critical thinking, or diving deep into specific data to find out, hey, what would be key here for us to be able to make the right decision. And in certain cases, it's also a very efficient interview question to spot fake stories. Okay, so oftentimes, you'll make up a decision just for the sake of selling yourself in the job interview. And using these types of questions on dealing with ambiguity, there could be multiple challenge or follow-up questions to this. And basically, why do you think the decision was the right one? What other data did you have to explore? What were some false tracks you'd encountered? And if you'd wish to do it all over again, would you do it the same way? And long story short, by using these follow-up and challenge questions, it will be quite easy to both qualify an interview candidate, but also to spot fake stories. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of insight on how these things work. Next one, tell me about the time when you were 75% through a project, program, or initiative and had to pivot in order to ensure its successful completion. All right, so notice here, 75% through a project, program, or initiative. So basically they are screening on your ability to deliver. Okay, and delivery means different things to different types of roles. That's why it's either an initiative or a program or a project. But long story short, think about what was your most challenging delivery and what was key for you to ensure that you delivered on that project, program, or initiative successfully. And what you want to do here, what you want to focus on here at all costs, it would be to focus on use your subject matter expertise to deliver on that initiative. Okay, so for example, a software engineer wouldn't want to say that the key to resolving a challenging software development project would have been that they convinced people of a different way, of a different approach to work on a project, but rather how they use their subject matter expertise to prove the point that, hey, I will achieve this using this approach, and basically this diffuse the situation and enable the project successful completion, right? So my point is, for software engineers, so the subject matter expertise is not necessarily soft skills as much as programming. Okay, so you would use your programming skills to diffuse to no longer get stuck and to focus on completion on that project. Whereas a PM could easily talk about how they, maybe called upon a meeting with different stakeholders where they presented, where they came up with a new solution, with a new possible approach to resolve this problem, and then they gained some buy-in from various stakeholders, and that diffused the tension and resolved the project. Essentially was key to deliver it, right? So notice here how different roles use their subject matter expertise to address this situation, right? Next one, tell me about the time when you received critical feedback from a manager or peer. How did you respond, and if there's anything you'd do differently if you'd have to do it all over again? Okay, so this type of question is getting asked because they want to screen on your interpersonal skills. Okay, and also maybe a little bit of backbone if you want. What happens here is, I believe the best way to explain how to answer this question is to explain to you what mistakes you'd want to avoid here. For example, a bad approach to answer this type of question would be when you talk about how you received a critical feedback from your manager, but they were wrong, and you proved them that they were wrong. You still did what they asked. Okay, so in spite of that, you proved that they were wrong. You did what they asked, and then at the end, you proved them, hey, yes, you see, but you were wrong about this. So this would not sell you. This would not go well with someone selling themselves on their backbone in a job interview. So that example, if you want, would be better framed something on the lines of, hey, my manager had some critical feedback, but I knew he was wrong. I dived deep into the data and found the data to prove him wrong. And then we had the conversation, we agreed, and then we ensured successful completion of the project, right? Versus my manager came with critical feedback. I knew he was wrong, but I still did how I said. And in the end, he saw, yes, I was right. I'm always right? So this is what you want to avoid with these types of situations. Or even better, if you'd have a critical piece of feedback where your manager was actually right. about that feedback, and you course corrected, and eventually the project went well. But nevertheless, keep in mind that the primary reason why someone would ask you such an interview question would be because they want to screen on your interpersonal skills. And it's not uncommon at all for people to put the blame on others when talking about friction inside their teams. Oh, my manager was wrong, my manager was late, my manager always took credit for my work, my previous company was very bad, or at least it was just bad luck maybe, right? So this is just to name a few, but it's super common that people shoot themselves in the leg with this approach of coming across argumentative and this type of stuff, right? Next one, if there's one thing you'd wish to improve on, what would it be? Okay, so if there's one thing you'd wish to improve on, what would it be? Why would they ask you this in a job interview? Okay, so to translate this interview question, they're asking you what's your weakness, right? And if I may just add a quick note here, it's hugely important and beneficial in a job interview to build your listening skills, to really listen what the question is actually asking you for. Because the moment you'll improve your listening skills, you'll know exactly, or you will at least be in a far better position to give them exactly what they want to hear. All right, and in the case of a weakness, the best way to pitch a weakness is with a great story. Okay, regardless of the weakness, or I should say, you could have a great weakness with a terrible story, or you could have a not so great weakness with an amazing story, and you'd blow them away and you'll bias them towards you and you'll get the job, right? So even if your weakness would be public speaking, if you have a great story to back that up, it'll still be a great answer, right? So notice here, how it goes. So they ask you a question which might not be framed in the way you've heard it before, right? But if you use your listening skills, you'll understand the key on why they ask you that question, in the case weakness, and the behavioral approach of giving a great story, right, to pitch the best possible answer in this. Because the definition of a behavioral interview is that when they ask you about your past experiences so they can predict your future performance on the job, right? This is why it's less common and less recommended to go hypothetical with answer to such question, except maybe for an introductory statement, how you would go around solving these things. Okay, next one. How do you handle stress in a fast-paced environment? All right, so again, if we read a little bit better on this question, we could easily replace how do you handle stress with how do you work in a fast-paced environment. Because let's be honest here, there's always going to be stress in work, because that's the nature of how these things work. But how do you work in a fast-paced environment? So if we reword the question as such, then we will quickly understand that they would want us to talk about how we took decisions in a fast-paced environment, how we managed to get stuff done when speed is key, speed is essential, right? And there's the best possible approach you'd go around answering these questions would be using frameworks, or at least keywords that are specific to the type of to your subject matter expertise, right? To give an example, Jeff Bezos used to have frameworks of type 1 and type 2 decisions. Type 1 decisions would be the more complicated ones, the ones that require extensive deliberations and reviewing and studying, because those decisions are not easily reversible. Right? So if you take them, then you basically have to stick with that type of decision, right? If you decide to get a wisdom tooth extraction, it's not possible to get it back, right? Now, on the other hand, if you have a decision that's easily reversible, then speed could be of essence in that circumstance. So, for example, if a customer asks you for a quick estimation on a delivery timeline of some feature, and where speed is, but they tell you, hey, we need this now. Okay, then you could afford trading in a little bit on accuracy for the sake of doing it quickly. right? Whereas if you really have to do some precision work, right? If you design your house with 5 rooms, it will be more challenging for you to change your mind later on, or at least it will be very expensive for you to do so, right? So type 1, type 2 decisions. So if you categorize them like this, and you talk about a type 2 decision, the thing I just said with the quick estimation on something where speed is key but accuracy isn't as important, that's the type of story which would sell best. But of course, there's plenty of frameworks, and again, specific to your roles, which would enable you to use these stories. So my point is, try to find a story where speed was key, but also try to fit that into a framework, because most of the time, the decision, the algorithm, the flow, the decision making you took will be linked to one such framework. Okay. Next one, have you previously worked cross-functionally? Right. So again, a question framed a little bit counterintuitively, because have you previously worked cross-functionally? Tell me about the time when you had a cross-functional collaboration. Right. It's impossible you have not worked cross-functionally unless you have 0 previous work experience. But I found that most people don't really know what cross-functional collaboration actually means. So cross-functional means when you work with people of different subject matter expertise than yours. Okay, and the key here, where the challenge stands with most candidates, aside not understanding what the cross-functional collaboration is that to adapt their communication style to the subject matter expertise of the person they're talking to, right? So software engineer talking with an executive, be an example, a salesperson talking to a technical person, these types of collaborations. And again, have you previously worked cross-functionally? So they are asking you for a story or 3 stories if you want when you work cross-functionally and it was a success, where you played a key role towards a successful outcome. Okay, so again, your ability to communicate to different types of audiences is hugely important, and you'd want to sell yourself on here. Maybe you're not communicating with a salesperson. You, as a technical guy, you found out that presenting a metric that would be super interesting for them would be key to the successful collaboration there. It could be any of these things, right? Next one, tell me about the time when you set a vision when there wasn't one. Okay, so maybe this question will make less sense to a entry-level role, right? But still is a quite popular question, and it asks for your ability to have a vision. By the time you had a vision for your business department or for your team or for your piece of software, if you want, this question makes sense for individual as well as for manager level types of roles. My only specific note would be to talk about the time you had a vision which relates to your subject matter expertise, right? So if you're a software engineer, you wouldn't want to talk about the vision you had for the company moving forward, right? Except if it was a small business and it was just a one-man show, right? So talk about your subject matter expertise, the time when you set a vision when there wasn't one, and again, for more senior types of roles, right? And the last question I want to talk about here in interviews with Google, a quite common one, tell me about the time when a project went wrong. Okay, so this is one of the trick questions in job interviews, especially for the behavioral type of interviews. They're asking you for a failure story. And these questions are super efficient for many reasons. I'll just mention maybe 2 or 3 of them. The first reason why they're so efficient is because if you didn't prepare the interview in advance, then that will show, because it will not come anywhere natural for you to talk about a failure, right? People don't like talking about failure, and you shouldn't talk about failure in job interview unless asked, or at least if you really know what you're doing, right? And I'll get back to this in a moment. Okay, the second reason why someone would ask you this in a job interview is because people don't like to accept. Some people don't like to accept that they have failure. So I often, when I ask people this for the first time, I often receive answers such as, "Then I never fail, I only learn." Okay, so again, this would be a terrible way to go around answering this. And the final reason why someone would ask you about a failure, the final thing I want to talk about here, why someone would, how to sell yourself on failures in job interviews, would be to demystify a little bit on why the question gets asked. So the question gets asked in the first place, they want to see if you have a failure, if you can talk about failure, because if you cannot talk about failure, that would be a no-go. If you can talk about failure, some people even go as far as to shoot themselves in the foot while talking of failure, how they got fired from their previous job 3 months ago because they did something wrong. You wouldn't want to do this in a job interview because it's simply too dangerous, right? Now, what you would want to do in a failure study would be to focus on your learnings. Okay, so I advise you to spend even half of your answer talking about your learnings, how you grew from that experience, from that specific failure. And in my experience, it will take you around 3 attempts to come up with a failure story, but even further, it will be quite challenging for you to allocate half of your answer, the results part of your star answer, if you want to talk about your learning, because simply there's work to be made there to really find, hey, what was interesting? What would be the most interesting stuff to sell myself on for the purpose of this job interviews? What types of learnings would be the most interesting? So there you go. This would be my top 10 interview questions, behavioral questions in interviews with Google. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.